world, and welcome back to this delightfully taboo channel. My name is Sarah, and today what I'd like to do is take us through the transits, the astrological transits that are coming up for the first week of November. And I will be mentioning some of the gene keys that correspond to hexagrams of the I Ching, if you prefer. And I'll just be covering some of the major transits of the week so that I don't get us too much in the weeds with all of the smaller transits that add flavor but aren't really necessary for understanding the structure of what's the energy is looking like. So we're going to skip to November 3rd and move into the first major transit of the week that I see from my perspective, which is the Sun opposing Jupiter. These are two very powerful planets, and the Sun is representative of our relationship with our Father. It can also be the ideal to which we strive, or it's the plot of the story. And Jupiter is this great benefic planet. You can think of Jupiter as another kind of male archetype, but more like a coach or like your cheerleader, somebody that's like pushing you out there, but in this way where it's supportive. Now, with these two planets opposing one another, oppositions are generally going to be challenging. However, I will say that this challenge between these two planets isn't necessarily something that would make you feel bad. The challenge here is going to be keeping your own ego in check. And that's because Jupiter is this planet of expansion, and with the Sun being kind of our will, this is just expanding, and it kind of will make us have this sense of higher purpose, where it's really just going to be important to keep ourselves in check with grandiosity and feelings of needing to be contributing to a like a big plan. It's really like tapping into that sense that we have of meaning and purpose, but just like blowing it up. So that's something to look out for, and that goes exact on November 3rd when the Sun is at 10 degrees and 30 minutes of the sign Scorpio, which would put Jupiter in the sign of Taurus at the exact same degrees, so 10 degrees and 30 minutes of Taurus. And a little bit about those themes of the signs too, with the Sun in the sign of Scorpio, that's a spotlight on things underground. You can think of like subterranean material coming to the surface. And with Jupiter in the sign of Taurus, this is, you could think of abundance in the sense of nature. So how all of our needs are served by nature, or are given to us by nature. There's abundance in nature. And so that's kind of like where my mind initially goes to thematically with Sun in Scorpio. It's also very strategic. This is kind of the general, somebody that's really good at looking at the plans and organizing the troops. And Taurus, with Jupiter and Taurus, it's, there's this desire to indulge too. So that's something that, we might be facing, is our indulgences and what it is that we like to kind of overdo. All the things you could think of: drinking, smoking, gambling, all the 7 deadly sins, any of that kind of material, just sloth. Like, yeah, Jupiter and Taurus is feelings oriented. It's all about sensuality in the senses and taking things in through the 5 senses. So yeah, there could be a spotlight on addictions. There could be a spotlight on any number of things that have been kind of hidden, and perhaps things that we've even already been looking into as Jupiter is retrograde. Jupiter retrograde, any planet retrograde, is taking those themes and turning them inward. Where Jupiter is direct, it's expansive in this world. How do we expand in this world? Which is why it includes themes of foreign travel and philosophy and religion, because it's like, how do we get out in this world? Whereas Jupiter retrograde is turning inward. So all of that expansion is happening inward in our internal world, in our psyche. And so the characters, I guess you could say, that I like to think of with this dynamic is Jupiter direct is like Gandalf, who leads you out on this mission, out to, go and be in a bigger role than you are in the Shire. Whereas Jupiter retrograde is kind of like the Cheshire Cat instead. It's these questions to you that's making you dig deeper inward, and many moments of aporia, or not having words for what it is that you've experienced, because it's just so profound, the things that you're discovering internally. So there could be that kind of sense going on, just really discovering yourself and looking inward during this time. But it could be a bit challenging, especially if you see those shadow traits and you don't necessarily want to all the time. All right, so then we move the very next day, actually. The very next day is a huge day too. So the 3rd and the 4th I'm looking at as kind of the biggest days. The 4th is the day that Saturn stations direct after being retrograde since June 17th. So as I just said about Jupiter, those themes of the planet are going to turn inward. Now, when we think about Saturn, Saturn is this planet of discipline. It's this planet that is requiring more. Just when you think you've done enough, Saturn's like, you didn't pick up the dishes though, so go back in there and get that done. And so it can feel somewhat stifling and frustrating and smothering and constricting and restricting. And it's just, especially during retrograde, as all of that is turning inward. And Saturn has been in the sign of Pisces. And at 0 degrees, it retrograded back from 7 degrees to 0 degrees. So what that means is it went back to the very initial point of Pisces. It went back to the very beginning and was like, you know what, I'm going to start over. And Saturn in Pisces is, I've described it as wearing a weighted vest and swimming. It is, constantly feeling like you're just drowning. The best way, to put it. So it's a little uncomfortable, Saturn in Pisces. It's not its favorite place to be by any means. And there's just no structure. It's in water, it's drowning, and it's like a lot of emotions, which Saturn is definitely not used to dealing with. Saturn is this planet that sits at the barrier, you could say, for the ancients anyways. Saturn sits at that barrier of the abyss, the heavens, everything beyond, and then everything that is like grounded and of this realm and of the physical realm. So it's kind of holding that barrier, and in that sense, Saturn kind of gets this reputation for being overly objective, or just objective, but in the contrast to emotions, like Saturn's like, no, I'm not dealing with emotions. So this is a dreamy place for Saturn to be in too. So that's something that we can work with. This frustration, instead of leaning into the frustration side, we can just see it as, okay, a lot of potential in these ideas that I have. And maybe I'm not going to be able to move forward with all of them in a concrete way, but they're definitely informing things that I can do in the future. So it's not all for nothing, but it definitely doesn't seem like it's moving very quickly by any means. And especially because Saturn is stationed direct to turn direct. Okay, if we're moving retrograde, we've got a pirouette, or whatever it's called when you turn right back around. So at that turning point to turn around, it's going to stay there for a moment. And in fact, we're probably going to feel this for the entire week, Saturn sitting stationary in the sign of Pisces at 0 degrees. And there are other things that are happening this day as well with some of the other planets, but I'm not going to dive too deeply into that. I really just want to focus on those two major transits, the Sun opposing Jupiter, and then Saturn stationing to turn direct in the sign of Pisces. So Saturn may assist us with keeping that grandiose, idyllic, and so let me finish that statement. Saturn can help us not get too big-headed, I guess you could say, whereas Jupiter and the Sun can help us to mitigate some of that melancholy of Saturn. So that is my brief update for this week in astrology. The gene keys for the week are going to be gene key 24 for the planet Jupiter. And the themes of that gene key are the frequency, the lowest frequency or the shadow frequency of addiction, the gift frequency of invention, and the siddhi is silence. For the Sun, we have that the Sun is in gene key 44, which has the shadow frequency of interference, the gift frequency of teamwork, and the and the siddhi is synarchy. And for Saturn, we have the gene key 50, which has a shadow frequency of corruption. The gift frequency is equilibrium, and the siddhi is harmony. So, that being said, you might consider looking back all the way to June when Saturn went retrograde initially at 7 degrees of the sign of Pisces, and look at any journal entries that you may have from back in June that could inform, and all the way through the summer, that could inform you of where you've been reviewing discipline, where you've been reviewing your structures, these what you allow to constrain you, what have you been allowing to hold you back, what have you been giving permission to hold you back, and really sensing into how you would like to move forward constructively in that area of life where Pisces is residing. And then for all of the planets, reviewing those gene keys or hexagrams to really help you to contemplate and meditate over the themes that you might notice in your life. So I hope you'll join me in the next video next week when we talk about the major transits for the second week of November. And I hope you enjoy the energies for the week. I'll see you soon.